Welcome to a new episode of Farina's World. Today I'm feeling a little extra excited because I have a very special guest with me. Imagine having an exchange student from Hogwarts right in front of you. For those of you who might not be familiar, Hogwarts is, well, let's just say it's a school for magic and wizardry. But that's just a tiny glimpse into the enchanting world we're about to dive into. Now, let me introduce you to our guest. She's someone who played a significant role in bringing magic to the big screens. You may have seen her in a certain fantasy movie series where she perfectly portrayed a character who captured the hearts of millions. In fact, she was the double of Emma Watson in the first three Harry Potter films. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Flick Miles, who brings a touch of magic to this podcast today. Flick, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Oh, that was such a lovely intro. I feel like I'm embarrassed.
Oh.
But yeah, that was lovely.
Thank
I
you.
wish everyone would intro me like that.
Yeah, I was so excited when I found you on Instagram. So yeah, it's true. You basically lived in Hogwarts for 3 years, right?
Yeah, I do say that actually. I think I probably got the closest you can to actually going to Hogwarts in terms of working on the film. So yeah, very very lucky. And obviously, as you said, so I was Emma's double from when I was like 10 to about 14. I
Wow,
worked on Harry Potter pretty much non-stop. So yeah.
nice. And I heard your podcast a little bit as well, and you said you got casted through or from a theater class. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. So, when I was 10 or in primary school, I just went to sort of an after school club,
Mm.
drama club, and the women who run that also had an agency. And I think just because when they were casting for Harry Potter, they just were looking at every single child from everywhere. That they'd got in touch with a lot of like smaller agencies to try and cast the children. So from that, they were still in touch with the smaller agencies when they came to
Okay.
casting the doubles, and then that's how they got in touch with this woman. And yeah, it was pretty straightforward from there. It wasn't really a long process. I literally went to the studios, met Emma, met Chris Columbus, David Heyman, John Seal, sort of people like that. So director, producer, cinematographer, and got the part through that. But yeah, because I never auditioned for Hermione or anything like that. I literally came in at
Mhm.
the stage of them trying to find a double. Um, so
Yeah, so the reason why I find it so fascinating because I think back then like everyone wanted to be in that position, and I remember I think the main characters also got casted through the theater class. I remember something like that, seeing that on an interview. And back then I was also in a theater class, and I'm like, oh, I'm living in the wrong place. Like I live
yeah.
in Germany, and they're casting like everyone in the UK.
Yeah, because on my podcast, I spoke to the people who did the casting for the first film,
Mm.
and I think the second film as well, actually. And they did say that they felt like they were looking at every single child that was in any sort of theatre class or drama class or had any sort of agent, like the whole way across the
Wow.
UK. So, yeah, so very lucky that they sort of saw me and thought that I looked enough like her to come and audition. Because I think there was probably about five or six girls that were with me when we all auditioned. And it's just down, it was literally down to looks and just who looked most
Mhm.
similar to Emma, and obviously like height wise and hair wise and stuff like that. But very lucky.
Absolutely. And have you been in an agency as well? Like, did you work on any other films as well, or was it just like coincidence?
No, Harry Potter was like my first and last last
Wow.
yeah, job in the film industry. I think that's part of the reason why I left though, is because I wasn't sure I wanted to pursue a career as an actor or as working in the film industry. Because if I had, then I probably would have stayed on to do more of the films.
Hmm.
Because I was quite lucky again that they would sort of just roll my contract over. At the end of every film, they just said, "Do you want to come back?" I'd say yes. And then obviously that was for the second and third, um, which yeah, I didn't have to like re-audition or anything like that. So very fortunate. And then when it came to the fourth is when I thought probably go back to school and normal life.
So you decided you were done with the film
Yeah,
time, or
yeah, it's just it's you know, like I think if you listen to the podcast, a lot of people say this, like it is all encompassing working on a film. It's pretty much your whole life. You don't have much going on outside of that. The Harry Potter films were really long shoots. They're about 9 months. And we had very little time in between. We had to keep going. Obviously, because all the children are getting older, so you don't have the luxury of waiting a few years and coming back and filming. We had to get them, if you wanted Harry, Ron, Hermione to stay the right age, we had to keep shooting. So there's very little break in between. And it's a full-time job, Monday to Friday. Sometimes even with travel on the weekends if we were going on location and stuff like that. So it's an amazing experience, but it is your whole life. And I think when I got to about 14, I sort of felt I had a bit of like missing being at school. I didn't really go to school. I went for like a couple of weeks each year just to keep in touch. I didn't do a full range of like the curriculum just because that was impossible to do whilst with like I mean, I'd try and do as much as possible, but you wouldn't be getting the same amount of like learning that you would at school, at actual school. So yeah, it just felt like the right time to leave. But it was really hard and it was really sad. And there's obviously days where I thought, oh, I wish I was still filming, still with everyone. But ultimately, I think it was the right choice.
Yeah, I must say, until I discovered you at your podcast, I didn't realize all the complex orga in the background, like all the background admin that comes with working with a bunch of school kids away from home.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
really, yeah, it's very strict rules when it comes to working with children, in terms of like even having you have to get like a license to work, so you have to have like a full medical and your school has to sign it off, and there's all that side of having permission to work. And then when you're there, it's very strict hours, strict breaks, in terms of like they have, not strict with us, we have to be like strict with them at what hours we can work and stuff. But they were really good. Warner Brothers obviously were very good, and made sure we had everything we needed and enjoyed working.
yeah. So it's like the restrictions with the working hours is also why you actually became a double, right? So like you said, you're a double unit one double. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So there's obviously a lot of different doubles. You have sort of stand-ins who don't really tend to film. They more will stand in a shot for it to be all lined up and for cameras to work out their movements. You have that sort of role, which they did have on Harry Potter, and they were actually adults. They're more like, so they can work like longer hours. We obviously have stunt doubles, which everyone knows what a stunt double is, and then body doubles is what I was. And yeah, I mean, adults do have body doubles for the same reason, like just to film more and just to help relieve some pressure, but more for the children as well as that. It was because you can only be on set for 4 hours a day. And just to film as much as possible. If they had me as well, that's all made up that Emma could do 4 hours and I could do 4 hours. I mean, it wasn't that every day. I wasn't on set for 4 hours every day, and some days she probably wasn't either. But it just helped to film things quicker, because adult actors, once you're over 16, you can pretty much be on set for for as many hours as, I don't actually know if there's like a legal restriction, but they can work really long hours. So especially if you had like a great hall scene where you had all the adult actors in, it really helped just having some doubles just to get more filmed within the day.
Yeah. And would you like to maybe give us a little peek into your daily life during that time? Because you weren't at home, right? You were all like in a different location and on set basically almost every day.
Yeah, so well, I obviously, I mean, I lived at home, but so every morning I'd get in sort of, I think around like 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then the studios is sort of like split into two halves. So there's like the sets and like where you'd film and all the sound stages. And then the other side was where we sort of like had our changing rooms, caterers, dressing rooms, catering, hair and makeup, wardrobe. That was all over the other side. But like my day would sort of look like I'd turn up, have some breakfast. Really nice way to start the day. Have some breakfast, get changed into my costume, which we wouldn't sit around in like full school uniform, but I'd put sort of like my top half on, so I didn't have to pull it over my hair and makeup. Go to hair and makeup. So you'd sort of be pretty ready. And then there would be a runner who would tell you like you're either going down to set, which could quite often happen because they might want to be like lining up shots or doing something a bit further away, like establishing shots, which they could use doubles for. And then they'd do more close-ups later in the day, which would then obviously be like Dan, Rupert and Emma. But if not, we'd go into schooling, and then it would literally just be a case of a runner would come and get you from school, and you'd go down to set, do a scene, come back up, and then come back down to do another scene. You'd literally come back and forward. There'd obviously be lunch. We didn't have dinner there. You'd go home for dinner. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, they'd wrap you. You'd go into hair and makeup, do your hair. Like I had like a hairpiece in for Hermione. They like take that off, take your makeup off, get changed, and then you'd go home. That was pretty much every day if it was at the studios. But obviously, we did go on location where we would stay in hotels, and there would be like bases. And just the difference would be is that it was like all set up and would be in sort of like trailers. There'd be like a hair and makeup trailer, a wardrobe trailer, and our dressing rooms would be trailers.
Okay, so I did not realize that you actually did stay at home like normally. And you were like, how long was the time away from home, like when you went on location?
Yeah, so I actually really lucky that I lived about half an hour away from the studios. If you didn't
Oh,
live near the
wow.
studios, you would stay in a hotel. So if you were anything sort of
Oh,
over
okay.
an hour away, you would stay in a hotel. But obviously I lived half an hour away. But when we went on locations, we were away for, sometimes 4 weeks. On the first film, we went up to the first film and the third film. I only remember doing really long. The first one we went up to Newcastle and Whitby and filmed sort of the Gothland station. So like when Hogwarts, the Hogwarts Express comes in, and all outside the exterior of Alnwick Castle, which was like the flying lesson with Madame Hooch, and then Durham Cathedral, which is a lot of the corridors of Hogwarts. And we must have, I think, yeah, we were up there for about a month. The second film, we weren't anywhere I remember for as long, but we were in still a lot of different places. And then the third film, all that Hagrid's hut was up in the Highlands of Scotland, and that whole sequence where they go to Free Buckbeak and they go back in time, that was all filmed up there in this one place. So we were up there for about a month filming that, because obviously it all had to sort of be filmed and then filmed again with them like go back in time to watch it again. So yeah.
Wow. It's so like it's just so different from like normal daily life, what we know. So
Yeah,
it's really cool.
I mean,
And
it's amazing. It was a really amazing experience.
yeah.
So lucky to have done it.
And in one of your interviews, you spoke about how this time on set became like a full family experience. Like your mom was there, and do you want to tell us a bit more about that? How was
Yeah.
it like a family experience?
Yeah, so when you're under 16, again, you have to have a chaperone come with you to film, to be like with you all day, not just when you're on set, they're with you all day. Um, which can either be your mom or your dad or anyone over the age of 18, could be like a cousin, your nan. Um, or they can provide you with a chaperone. There's like professional people who actually do that for a living, and they look after
Oh,
children
really?
working on films. Yeah. I was lucky that my grandma and my mum came with me. So my grandma came with me
Nice.
Monday, Tuesday, and my mum came with me Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But yeah, but my dad, when we went to Oxford filming, like he would come and chaperone me. at different, whenever he could, when he wasn't working. And my sister and my brother were both extras in all the films as well. So Warner
Oh,
Brothers were
wow.
very good at letting it be like a family thing. And whenever we were on location, they would make sure my family could come and stay every weekend. They'd come up on the Friday and stay till like the Sunday night, um, which was really, really nice. Because, being 10 and being away from home for a month is quite, my mum, obviously my grandma was with me, but not always my mum, is quite intense.
Hmm.
You do get homesick, when you're, well, even when
Yeah,
you're an adult, you can get homesick, but especially when you're a child. And I think also for my mum and dad, it was just nice to see what was going on, because for them, because so they told me I'd got the part, um, when I first auditioned, they said I got the part and I signed the contract and everything. They said, "Oh, we'll be in touch when we start shooting." And they literally called. I feel like it was honestly like the morning before we were going to fly, saying we're flying up to Newcastle tomorrow to start shooting. Um, so me and my mum had to make like a emergency like run to the shopping centres just to get some like bits and bobs just for me going up there. But obviously for my parents, like they have nothing to do with the film industry. They have never done anything like that. Like nobody in my family has. So I feel for them just to have their 10-year-old daughter go and do this, like I guess they probably felt a bit like they wanted to see what the setup was and what was actually going on. Um, they're not just going to send their daughter up there like me and my grandma and just be like, bye, that's fine. So it was nice that Warner Brothers let them come out. Like my mum actually did come with me at first, for a week, and then my grandma took over. But yeah, just I think it was nice for them to see what was going on and know that their 10-year-old daughter was being well looked after, which we were.
Yeah. Yeah,
So.
definitely. And how did that work with school? Because I mean, you still had to study, and but you couldn't go to your normal school. So how was
Yeah.
that?
So I did, if there was ever a day where Hermione wasn't needed, I would try and go to school. Well, it depends. I would try and go to school as much as possible. Sometimes it just wouldn't work out.
Your normal school or?
My normal school, yeah.
Ah, okay.
But I mean, I think honestly, the first film, I don't think I went to school. Maybe I did like 1 or 2 days, if that. The second film, I did a few more days because I then moved school into secondary school. And actually, Hermione isn't in a big chunk of that film because she's obviously been petrified by the basilisk. So she's in the hospital bed. So it's like Ron and Harry do a bit more. And obviously, she doesn't. Um, in the beginning, she also isn't in the car when they steal the car and fly to Hogwarts when they miss the train. So actually, Hermione's got a bit isn't in that film as much. So I did manage to go to school on like odd days. But then the third film again, I think I must have done like a few odd days because again, then Ron kind of isn't in the third film as much because obviously it's Harry and Hermione that go back in time,
Mhm.
because he's been bitten on the leg by Sirius, so he's in the hospital
Yeah.
bed. Um, but so I would as much as I can try and go to my regular school, but that was a handful of days. But at the studios, my teachers would send to the tutors. So we had sort of three main tutors, Jane, Peter, and Ken. Jane sort of did all the arts and English and history and that sort of stuff. Ken did maths and Peter did sort of science, geography, that sort of thing. And I did have a timetable. I had an actual timetable of who I would go to if I wasn't filming, where I would be and what class I'd be in. And my teachers would send them the curriculum, so what I was meant to be doing in class, and they would teach that to me.
Okay. Wow.
Um,
So just to like get it right in my head, so you basically had like a filming schedule and a school schedule, all organized by the film crew, or like
yeah,
how did
so
that work out?
yeah, so there'd be a filming schedule that would be what we're filming that day, and the film crew would sort that. That would be completely. Then there was our tutoring, and our head tutor Janet would sort out a timetable for me, which would just say like 9 till 12, I'm in with Jane, and then I'd have lunch, and then 12 till 3, or like 1 till 3, I'd then be in with Peter, and then 3 till 5, I'd be in with Ken. But any time during that, you can get called out to film. But that's just
Oh,
so that
okay.
kind of where you are, and the tutors can sort of prepare. Um, but it's yeah, it's quite intense because obviously a lot of the times it would be almost just like one-on-one with a tutor.
Mm.
And that's why it was kind of really nice. And we did big scenes like the Great Hall and stuff, and lots of the children were in because they'd obviously all be in school as well. So the classes would be, when I say busy, it would be like 5 children. That
Oh
just made it
wow.
more, yeah, 5 or 6 children, but like it just made it a bit more fun than if it's just like all day one-on-one with you and a tutor. But the tutors were great and they really tried to make it as fun as possible,
Mm.
and tried to do as much as possible. Like I really can't fault them because it's also hard for them just being one-on-one with a child all day and trying to, I mean, obviously tutor us, but make it fun and make learning interesting when you're just in this small room. Um, but yeah, they did it and they were all really lovely.
So basically, they got your filming schedule and they see what times are or which slots are open at the moment if you're not like needed spontaneously, and then they would schedule you around that.
No, they were both scheduled and no matter what, and then I would just come to and from school. So
Okay,
the timetable was the timetable no matter what the filming schedule was. Um,
okay,
just because you don't know when you're going, the tutors don't know when you're going to and from
okay,
set. It is, like you said, spontaneous. They would just turn up and say you need to come. So they would just plan as if you were at school all day, but you wouldn't
okay.
be.
Okay, and the tutors, they, because you're not the only one being tutored by them, so they do have to like get all these different schedules and like teach one in, I don't know, fifth grade, one in sixth grade, one in seventh grade. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know how they did it because obviously for like so Dan, Rupert, and Emma had separate tutoring. I think maybe Rupert and Emma were tutored. I can't remember. I was actually trying to think about this the other day. I can't remember whether Rupert and Emma were tutored together. And Dan, I know Dan had his own tutor, Lena, because she was married to Peter, the other tutor,
Ah,
like one of our tutors. So he definitely had his own tutor. But I can't remember what Emma and I'm gonna have to ask my mum what Emma and Rupert did. But obviously the other tutors, they would be like me, the Harry double and the Ron double would be the people who were there basically full time. So I don't know what the other cast did in terms of their schooling when they were just in sort of odd days. I don't know what they did. But I'm sure, I think probably the same, that their teachers sent in their curriculum and the tutors would
yeah.
work around that. But the thing is, we were all similar, but quite similar ages. So I think actually I think Emma and I were the youngest. And then it was sort of, people were sort of about two, up to about 2 years older than us, because then obviously when you were over 16, you didn't actually have to go to school. So
Mm.
sort of the people like Chris Rankin, who played Percy Weasley, and Sean Biggerstaff, who played Oliver Wood, they didn't have to go to school because they were older. So it was only up to a certain
Yeah.
point. So it was only a certain amount of curriculum they had to cover.
Yeah, but that's what I meant. Like I wasn't aware of all this like extra admin going on when you work
mm,
with kids compared to with yeah older kids or adults.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
it's a
And
lot.
are you still friends with some of your closest people on set, like other doubles or
Yeah,
people?
so I it's so weird. I actually bumped into the guy who was Harry's double the other day. The other day, which was quite funny. Randomly as well. We were just both in
Oh wow.
like a hardware store. This is actually probably about a year ago. In like a hardware store where we live. We both live in the same area, but we've never actually bumped into each other. But I
Oh
have
wow. So like a 20-year reunion or what was it?
it was really strange. Like we were still friends. We all still know each other and like we have each other on socials and stuff, but I wouldn't say like I regularly meet up with anybody. So I know him, but just hadn't seen him in a while. So it was just bizarre that that's how I bumped into him. But that was really nice. Yeah, just and he met his wife on the films, like the later films. So it was really nice. I got to meet her, and he has kids, and I have kids now. So it was like this little mini
Nice.
Harry Potter reunion in the middle of B&Q, which is like a DIY store in the UK. So we must have thought we were mad. So we were like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I have a couple of them on socials. I recently they have sort of Harry Potter conventions. I don't know if you've ever heard of these sort of things where fans can go and they do like panel talks, and you can like meet and greet cast, and it's great. It's like loads of like people do like full costume, like amazing, amazing, amazing. And I've been to a few of those and bumped into, like, met up with a few people, which has been like really nice reminiscing. Like Chris Franken, who I just mentioned, who played Percy Weasley, he does like really well on the convention circuit. And I've been a few times with him, and he's done it quite a few times, and like a few years ago was my first time, and him and his partner Ness like really took me under their wings. I had no idea what I was doing. They were like, just stick with us, you'll be fine. And last summer I went to Chicago again, like with him and Sean Biggerstaff played Oliver Wood, and Tom Felton was there, and who else, I'm trying to think. Oh, Rowan, who played the young Sirius Black, Ellie, who played a young Lily Potter. So there's like a few people that actually,
Wow.
and some of them, like obviously Rowan and Ellie, I didn't actually film with, but I've met them since. So when you're still in the Harry Potter world, your paths do weirdly cross with people, which is really, really nice.
That's amazing. And how would you say that whole experience, how did it shape your life? Like, I mean, now you're going to these conventions and it's like bringing up all the experience from back then.
Yeah,
But also, yeah,
it's
go
a,
ahead.
it's Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off then. It is a funny one because I had years where I had nothing to do with Harry Potter. Obviously, I left in 2004, I think. And like I said, I still knew people and would still like see them. And so like, on a social, actually, I went back for the fourth film just as an extra to
Ah,
be part
okay.
of your board. They just said, I was like, can I just come back? They were like, yeah, which was really nice. And on the other films, I'd just go in to visit. But really, I had like nothing much to do with it until I started the podcast, which was in 2020, I want to say. I can't no, 2021. I can't even remember when I launched the podcast. I think it was 2021. But I'd been filming sort of since the end of 2020. That I've really got back into it. So and
And
now
what made you change? Like what happened that you decided to go back to
yeah,
that?
so it's I can't even take credit for it. I have a friend who I always name checks to give him a shout out because it was his idea. So a friend of mine called Chris, um, he sort of like loves films, got a real interest in film, and whenever we'd sort of talk about Harry Potter or my experience on Harry Potter, he would sort of say, "Oh, that's really interesting, and I don't think maybe people know that much about about doubling, and also maybe just about working on a film set as a child. I think maybe people don't know that much about, and also
Yeah.
working on just like a huge, huge franchise like Harry Potter is quite a unique situation." So he was like, "I feel like your stories are quite interesting. It could be a good podcast." And at first I was thinking, oh no, this is like really out of like my comfort zone, being like a host or even like talking. I am a journalist. That is what I do as my like muggle job,
Okay.
my like day job. But
But
I
writing or what kind of journalist?
I work for a news outlet that deals with the British military, which is so different from anything like this. But I'm always like behind camera. I'm never in front of the camera, well, rarely in front of the camera. I work more in like a producer role. So doing anything like this feels like really out of my comfort zone. So at first I was like, absolutely not. I could not do that. Then we went into lockdown because of COVID, and I sort of felt like I had a lot of spare time on my hands. So I was like, oh, maybe I
Mhm.
should just reach out. You just never know. I was like, is anyone even going to want to talk, be interviewed, or be on the podcast? So I just thought I'd like reach out to a few people and see whether they were interested. And a few people came back to me, and they were. And then I really have to be thankful to them as well. Sort of someone like John Seal and Nick Dudman and Martin Bayfield, like they were like the first kind of people that I interviewed, because I feel like they kind of remembered me, and we had we had worked together quite closely when I was working on the films. And then they would sort of put me in touch with other people who put me in touch with other people, and that's how I kind of got it
Amazing.
going. And then yeah, from then it's just been amazing. The sort of things that come up, like getting to speak to you. It's just nice to speak to people and talk about Harry Potter and sort of reminisce about that time and talk about the podcast. So yeah, now I'm like fully submerged in it all again.
By the way, I can totally relate with the like, podcast fear. Like I also said, I can't do that. I even recorded a podcast years ago, and I never published them because I was so terrified of it.
I
But
know.
yeah, I also just went live last year.
Yeah, but you know, you just got to go for it. And I think like podcasts
Exactly.
are so nice. It's lovely just talking to people. I think,
Yes.
and I also really enjoy just listening to people talk if it's about an
Mhm.
interesting subject. I think it's, you know, a really nice sort of medium. Like it's a nice
Yeah,
to
and I
listen to.
must say, I was also like always interested in like how movies are being made, like when as a little kid already. So like hearing your stories, like behind the scenes, how everything's working out, it's just so interesting to me. Like back then,
Yeah,
I always would watch what's it called, like behind the scene, like extra movies, like back then when we had DVDs and stuff, you know,
yeah,
it was always
yeah,
like an extra
totally.
DVD.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I think people do kind of like behind the scenes stuff.
Yes.
So it always feels like it's sort of shrouded in secrecy slash it could be really glamorous, but it's actually probably not. Things are quite secret, but as film time to move on since the film's been released, I think you can have more behind the scenes details.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, how does your life look nowadays? Like, are you still in the film industry? You said you haven't done anything for years. Did you play in any other movies or not at all?
No, that was literally Harry Potter is my only my only
Wow.
one. And now, like I said, I'm a journalist. That's what I do in my day job, but I'm currently on maternity leave, as I just had a baby. She was
Oh,
actually,
congratulations.
yeah, she was a month yesterday, a month old
Oh,
yesterday.
wow. What? And now you're
Yeah,
sitting here.
yeah. And I
And you
have a
look amazing.
oh, thank you. I feel like I've got my ring light on, which is covering a lot of tiredness. Um, and I've got a 2.5-year-old son, so they keep me very busy.
Wow. In another interview, you said you always wanted to go back to Scotland with your husband. Did you ever do that, or did you do it yet?
No, I haven't. I absolutely would love to do that. Like, because I know because my parents went up to Scotland. They just went away
Oh,
just
no.
and they went back to the hotel that we stayed in when we were there.
Wow.
There's just so many memories. So I'd love to go and take him. Because it's just like a really beautiful part of the world, like up there. It's just so stunning. I mean, you can see in the films, it's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Um, you know, and I love Scotland. I've got a Scottish family. My nan's from Glasgow and my granddad was as well. So yeah, I love Scotland anyway. But I'd love to take him up and do and show him sort of a bit of where we filmed.
Maybe a little Harry Potter reunion in Scotland.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I should try and podcast live there and get somebody to come with
Yes,
me. That could be
that would
fun.
be amazing.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, if I went up there, I could definitely record an episode doing a walk, showing everybody where we spent time doing. It was more the behind the scenes stuff again in Scotland. Like obviously where Hagrid's hut was beautiful and it was such you know, a great place to film and also just like a really you know, pivotal part of the film or like really important part of the film where they're trying to free Buckbeak and everything that comes with that and going back in time and finding out who Sirius is and that whole part of the film is obviously really mega. Um, but I think it was actually just like behind the scenes, like I think I've sort of spoken about this before on my podcast, but you know, we were in our third year of all working together very closely. There was a real like family feel. Everybody knew each other really well. So going away was really fun because it was like a family holiday with like 100
Yeah.
people.
Wow.
You know, all us kids were really close as well. Like we loved swimming and we got really into like fishing. So our hotel was right on the loch and we'd like fish on the loch and yeah, we were just all really close and it was a really good time. And again, like Warner Brothers made sure we had loads to do and it was like weekends and they made sure, you know, we went bowling. They would like close off this bowling alley for us so we could all go, you know, cast and crew would all be there together. and they really looked after us. And it was just a really fun time. And I feel like I've always remembered that as like a really standout moment of like my whole Harry Potter experience. And it's really interesting because when I've spoken to other people, they've also said that, which is really nice that it's not just me as a child thinking, oh, and it was like a holiday. Actually, like one of my interviews was with actually Rupert Grint's, it was his chaperone, and then she became his PA. And she said like Scotland was one of her favorite, because we were actually very close with Sarah. She was like one of my closest people on when I was working on the film. She said it was one of her favorite times. Like the interview that I today with Jessie Schroeder, who's the post-production supervisor, but also worked really closely with Chris Columbus and then Alfonso. She said it was like a really fond memory of her. So it's really nice that other people feel the same way, because when you're a child, I always think like, because I was so young, especially at the beginning, I always think, do I remember things properly? Do you know what I mean? You just sometimes can remember
Yeah,
different as a child as to how they actually were. So it's
definitely.
really lovely when I speak to adults and they were like, no, it was like that. And it was that nice, because obviously also as a child, you are very much, and working on the films, we were very much shielded from any stress or anything that might have been going wrong or anything like that. So it is really lovely when you speak to other people and they echo your feelings about how lovely it was and how everyone was a family. And that's not just a line they were telling us children to make us enjoy the time. It was actually like that. And like everyone, whenever I ask people, always sort of at the end of the podcast, I say to people like, what's their like standout memory from working on Harry Potter? And a lot of them say it's not a memory, it's actually just the people. And that was like the best thing. And that is actually why so many people worked on the films from the first film to the last film, which was like 10 years of their life. And I don't think you would do that if it wasn't for the fact that you absolutely loved where you were working and the people you were working with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me ask you that question. What was your standout moment?
Well, I think like I just probably going on
Okay.
location to Scotland, yeah, and just going on location in general, anywhere. It was just fun, not obviously being at the studios was great, and that was our home, and that was lovely. But I think if you're doing that every single day, anything that was sort of a little bit different just made it a bit
Yeah.
more, just brought a new wave of excitement. We were always excited to be there and filming. Like there was always that element that never wore off. I never got bored of being like, oh, it's filming today. I was
Mm.
always excited to go in. There was always something exciting happening. Like I said, it was like a big family. It was always seeing people I liked, spending time with people I liked. But I think there was just an extra excitement in the air if we were ever filming on location. And also, like you can see from Harry Potter, they're gorgeous films. So everywhere we were filming were like beautiful places. Like we filmed in like Oxford in the Bodleian Library, which is amazing. We played Gloucester Cathedral, like Durham Cathedral, up in Scotland, like Bath, like we just everywhere we went was just like gorgeous, beautiful places. So it was never like, oh, we were
Remember
just
how many? Sorry. Do you
sorry.
remember how many different locations you went to?
I don't. I actually can't. I'd have to really think it through, and I'll probably have to speak to my mum and dad. They do. I have to refer to my mum and dad a lot. I'm like, what was this again? Because they remember
Yeah.
some stuff that I don't. Um, but there was no filming like somewhere not it was all really gorgeous places, and I think like Harry Potter really showcases some really beautiful places in the UK and really beautiful buildings. Because
Absolutely.
a lot of the interior of Hogwarts is actual places in the UK that you can go and visit, which is also amazing as a fan. I think people love doing those sort of location tours. And even when you watch them in the film, you see the Hogwarts Express, like looks like it's like going to Hogwarts, like all that is actually like beautiful Scottish Highlands and the viaducts and stuff like that is actually places that you can go and see.
Mm.
So yeah, location always, that was always like a fun highlight for filming. But I know I said this is what everyone says, but honestly, like the best part was just being with the people, and everyone was so nice, and just made it so fun.
That's amazing. I can totally imagine. And I
Mm.
remember another moment, like I don't know if you would call it a standout moment, but you were the cat. for
Yes, yeah. Oh, I
one
forgot
scene.
about that. That's another like really special moment. And not just because that's like the part of the film, but again, it was the whole process of doing that part. So just so people who don't know, that Hermione turns into a cat in the second film when she pulls a cat hair instead of a human hair off Millicent Bulstrode's robes and puts it into the polyjuice potion. So when Harry and Ron turn into Crab and Goyle, she turns into a cat. So that's the part in the film. But I had to work really closely with Creature Effects, who's like Nick Dudman's team, in that cat look. Like, I don't know, obviously not creatively, they did all that, but I was just there when we had to do like different, they tried out some different looks, and obviously had to show Chris Columbus, and then we actually shot that I actually like shot that sequence purely because Emma had a slight reaction. The spirit glue is quite strong to put all that makeup on, obviously.
Mm.
um and she had like a slight reaction to that glue. Nothing serious, but they were just like, if we could get somebody else to do it, then let's see. So they asked me, and obviously I was like, absolutely yes. uh, that what like 12-year-old doesn't want to be turned into a cat?
Yeah, that's cool.
I was like, absolutely. And like I said, I got to work with Nick really closely and see how they do this whole process, because it almost looks like you would think you put it on as like a mask, but
Mm.
it's not. It was made up of like hundreds of pieces, like
Oh,
cheek,
wow.
and all the whiskers are put in individually. And I had this
Oh,
like
wow.
my Lisa, who does the hair, did all the hair, and that had like ears individually put in. It's not just like a pull-on Halloween mask sort of thing. It's a really intricate, beautiful makeup that they did.
How long
um
did it take to create that?
to well to they I don't know how long it takes them to make it, weeks if not
Or like
months.
to put it on,
To
like
put
for
it on,
you?
about 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then
And
it's
how
so
long?
sad because to take it off takes about 10 minutes because you can't reuse it. So you literally
Yeah.
pull it off and it all comes off. And it's so sad. It's just like they had to have, and so they had to have several versions of the mask as well, because we filmed over 2, maybe 3 days, I think. I was in that
Oh,
costume
wow.
for, in that makeup for. Yeah, so that's it.
I
Yeah.
can imagine. I think if I would wear a cat mask like that, I would be like, oh, should I take some photos before I take it off? Maybe I should take some more photos before
Oh,
I take
we
it
had
off.
so yeah, we had to have so many photos, definitely. But it was so weird because I was obviously just in the studios, just walking around in this cat makeup. Everyone was like, oh.
Yeah, that's very cool.
But an amazing experience, and Nick is just like such a incredibly talented person, also like such a huge name in the film industry. You know, he's worked on like Star Wars and done looks for Yoda and stuff like that.
Wow.
So you know, working with him and seeing how he works, and also him being the nicest person as well. His whole team, like the nicest people. So not only like extremely talented, also wonderful people. It was amazing working with them. And then also, this is funny, whilst I was there, so Hermione is you know, she gets petrified by the basilisk in the second film. So whilst I was there, they were like, can we take a full cast of your body for to make this model for Hermione when she's petrified? So whilst I was there as well doing the cat stuff, I also, so as if, you know, if you've broken an arm or you have a sort of plaster cast on, they did that of my body from the neck
Oh,
down.
wow.
So when you see Hermione petrified, it's Emma's head on my body. But
Oh,
again,
wow.
if you're like 12 and they're like, can we just plaster cast your whole body? You're like, yeah, that sounds so fun. I just had to stand like holding onto these two poles whilst they did a whole cast of my body. And they also did one of my face, but they obviously do that with you know, like if you have dental molds, that pink
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of stuff, they did that over my face. And then they did actually give me a cast of my face. So in my house, I have a cast of like my 12, 13-year
Oh,
old
wow. That's
face, just
cool.
perfectly preserved.
How long did it take to create that cast?
I think it doesn't take, I think maybe an hour. It sets really
Okay,
quick.
that's too bad.
But it just takes a while to get it all on, get you completely covered and then
Yeah,
there. But again, like you're not standing there for hours on end, it sets really quick. And
yeah.
then they have to like saw you out. So like you come apart as two halves and then you step out and then you put it back together. So yeah, that's
It's so cool. It's just like so many little moments and memories that just make up this whole experience. It's amazing.
yeah, and that's why I just, I was so lucky to do it. It was the most incredible
Absolutely.
experience. All these little things, going around the UK filming, working with these like incredibly talented filmmakers. It's really just a once in a lifetime experience that I was so lucky to have.
Did you actually read Harry Potter before? Like, were you totally into Harry Potter, or was it completely new?
I was, and I always say this, like outside of even having anything to do with the film, am naturally a huge Harry Potter fan, and I would be even if I wasn't, if I
Amazing.
hadn't been part of it. I'd read the first three books were out when we first started filming, and I'd read those. And I've read all of them when they would come out when we were filming. Obviously I kept reading them. I love rewatching the films even now. So yeah, I'm like a huge Harry Potter fan anyway.
Amazing. I was just gonna ask, how often have you seen the movies?
Yeah, like they're on in the UK, they're pretty much on every Christmas time. And they're on Netflix now actually, which is quite good. I wouldn't say I go onto Netflix and watch them, but definitely when they're on TV, me and my husband love watching them. He
Right.
likes Harry Potter too. So definitely at Christmas time, I'd say every Christmas I watch at least sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog is going mad outside.
I didn't
Um,
hear
oh,
it.
okay. At least I say every Christmas we watch a couple of them.
Okay, wow.
And I love watching them. It's only good memories.
What would you say? What did you gain and what did you lose through the experience, considering that you've been away from school, your community, and your friends for so long?
Um, so I mean, I get gains. Well, from everything I've said, you can see just like a once in a lifetime experience, which I know so many young people would have, given a lot to have. I think I'm so lucky. I never lose sight of that fact. I was so lucky to be part of it and to have such a like amazing experience. But I don't. It's so hard to say whether I lost anything because you don't know what it would be like if I wasn't doing that. But definitely, changing schools and not being there, um, and not, probably things like going to parties and stuff like that. I didn't really do that, and it wasn't just because I'm not saying I didn't have friends. I did have friends, but when you're working full time, you're exhausted on the weekends. And I think my parents were quite precious over making sure I had downtime and I was ready to work again on a Monday.
Mm.
Because although, like I said, I never experienced any pressure from Warner's or the film crew or anything like that. But ultimately, you are there to do a job. Um, and making Harry Potter is a multi-million pound machine that's making these films, and you are part of that, and you have signed a contract to say you are going to be there every day and work even at 10 years old. Of course, if you were ever sick or anything, they were so good with our welfare. I'm not saying they were there like get to work, but ultimately you were there to work. I was being paid to be there. It wasn't just like a fun thing that I was doing. It was a full-time job I had, and I had to, it was that. But like I said, on the flip side, I never felt the pressures of that. I never felt pressure to go in or perform or do anything. They made our welfare was like our welfare was their top priority, I'd say.
That's
um
amazing.
so yeah, but probably I did miss out a little bit on doing more social things with friends and stuff on the weekends.
But did you get back to it afterwards, like when you're done filming? Or
Yes.
was it hard for you to get
Yeah,
back?
don't worry, I do have friends now. No. um yeah, no, I was really lucky. Do you know, I was quite lucky that quite a few of my friends from primary school went to my secondary school, so when I went back I did know people.
Okay,
um
nice.
but yeah, I went to a very nice secondary school as well. Everyone was really welcoming when I came back, and I've got still my friends now are my friends from school. So I managed to slot back in and have a good social life, so don't feel sad for me.
I'm very excited with you about this whole experience and about your podcast as well. Because if someone wants to listen to you more and wants to hear more about the full experience behind the scenes, listening to who was on your podcast so far?
So this series, we've had Michael Saracen, who was the cinematographer for Prisoner of Azkaban, who is super interesting. I think like if you know the films, you know definitely the tone of the film and the look of the film shifts from the first and second, which were Chris Columbus, like glossy children's films, to sort of a more adult, darker film with the third one. So he talks all about that. And then the episode that's come out today is Jessie Schroeder, who now amazingly is a VP at Pixar, but when she worked on Harry Potter, she was a post-production supervisor, and had a really close relationship with Chris Columbus. So she talks loads about organizing like his day-to-day on set, and then about post-production, which I think is so interesting. It is such a difficult job doing post-production because, like she says, you have to make sure all the trains come into the station at the same time. So all the things that happen after the camera's rolling, to do with like the edit, to do with music, to do with like grading, to do with visual effects, she is like the mastermind that made sure those all happened for the film to hit their deadline. And the turnaround with Harry Potter from when we stopped shooting to when it was being released was ridiculously short. So she's an absolute mastermind,
Wow.
which is now why she is like head of post-production for Pixar. But yeah, but there's a whole, I think there's like 30 episodes of all different people, like storyboarders, like again, oh, we've got this series, we've got the head of visual effects, so he's talking all about like Quidditch and stuff like that. Like I said, like Martin Bayfield, who played Hagrid the Giant. Who else? Just loads of people who are just also Nick Dudman, like I spoke about creature effects. If you want to hear more about making like Dobby and Forks and Fluffy and you know all these sort of creatures, the unicorns, centaurs, he talks all about that. So there's loads of really interesting people, and like my job is literally just to like ask the questions and they just go off on like these amazing stories. So they're all just brilliant.
That's
And you
amazing. So what?
so you can listen to it on I think it's on most places where you'd get your podcast, but I know definitely on Apple and Spotify and on Spreaker. If you just search Behind the Wand, you'll find it. Or if you look for me on Instagram, it's linked. If you look for me on Instagram, I literally link it everywhere, so you can't.
I will also link it in the show notes, and when the episode is coming out, I will definitely link to your
Thank
profile and
you.
your podcast
Thank
as
you.
well.
That's
Thank
so
you
kind.
so, so much.
No, thank you. That was like, oh, I just love talking about Harry Potter, and it's you know, I'm really flattered that you've asked me to come on your podcast and speak about it. That's really, really kind of you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for taking the time. And I'm excited to hear more about you. And hopefully one day maybe we can meet in person, maybe in
Yes,
Scotland.
yes, maybe in Scotland. Let's do it.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much.
No
And
problem.
yeah, again, to all the listeners, if you want to see more Flick Miles Behind the Wand and Instagram Flick Miles. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye.